I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, Washington state lawmakers need to be reminded who they work for. We're inviting you to join us this Wednesday in Olympia to take a stand. Plus, Democrats in Washington state have made calling for a ceasefire in Gaza part of their official platform. The American Jewish Committee joins us to respond. Also, the unbelievable deflection of blame in the death of a 3-week-old baby. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. We start the show today with a call to action. You know, we see so many of these professional protesters in Seattle and elsewhere in Washington state who, I'll give them credit, they show up. Even if it's in the name of anti-Semitism. They'll show up on a Saturday and they'll close down a freeway for hours on end. They'll show up in Bellevue as they did over the weekend and protest. And I feel like it is way past time for hardworking Washingtonians who are seeing more and more money taken from them for no real reason, who are suffering under the weight of increased gas prices, which has resulted in it being difficult for people to feed their families, people who are dealing with the public safety crisis that we find ourselves in, businesses and private citizens alike. It's time that we do the same thing. It's time that we stand up for ourselves as well. If some pro-Palestine demonstrators can show up in large numbers and block freeways and block transit and break the law, and we can, as hardworking Washingtonians, stand up for ourselves as well. And if we want things to change in the state, we have to start doing it. And there's an opportunity this Wednesday to do just that. And I want every single one of you watching to join us if you can. And what's at stake here? I think it's larger than just the 6 initiatives that have now been certified officially by the Secretary of State's office. This is something we've been covering now on the show for some time. 6 initiatives that range from one that would restore reasonable police pursuits, to stopping a state income tax, to repealing the capital gains tax, to repealing aspects of the Climate Commitment Act, to making the long-term care tax optional, to restoring parental rights so you know what's going on with your kid in schools. All 6 of these initiatives have been certified by the Secretary of State's office, which means that they're now in the hands of the legislature. And our state constitution is clear that initiatives of the people to the legislature must be, shall be, a top priority for lawmakers in Olympia. Above everything other than budgetary concerns, than bills that need to be pushed through to deal with the budget, the initiatives to the legislature should be next in line. But what's happened to them so far? Have they been given a hearing? Nothing. They're sitting there without any action from the Democratic majority. In fact, the Speaker of the House at the beginning of the session said that this sort of stuff saddened her, that the initiative process as it stands right now saddens her. When we look at those 6 initiatives, they account for 2.6 million signatures across those 6 initiatives, which represent more than 800,000 unique voters in Washington state. Some people signed more than one, some people signed just one, but 800,000 Washingtonians put their signature on at least one of those initiatives. Think about that. That is a huge percentage of the electorate in our state. Nearly 1 million people to send these to the legislature for their consideration, and they ignore them. And what are they focused on in the meantime? They're focused on tripling the property tax lid. They're focused on giving hearings to bills that would allow violent criminals and killers to vote and serve on juries and run for office while they're behind bars. And meanwhile, these 6 initiatives to the legislature languish. And it is because, of course, they would seek to repeal key wins that Democrats in the majority have pushed through in recent years. So what we're calling on is for you, for hardworking Washingtonians, whether you signed these initiatives or not. This is about the sanctity of that process. You know, some of the most critical protections we have in the state were born out of the initiative process, which is guaranteed to us by the state constitution. Abortion rights, if that's something that you think is important in Washington state, it was the voters who pushed for it back in the 1970s. It was an initiative. The Public Records Act, which makes sure you and I and members of the media can see what the government is doing behind the scenes, that was an initiative. Same-sex marriage in this state, that was an initiative. I mean, hell, if you care about gun control, 2018, there was an initiative on gun control. This is about standing up for that process. Whether you like the outcome of those initiatives or not. I'm sure there are many people who signed on to one of these 6 Let's Go Washington initiatives who didn't support the 2018 initiative on gun control. There are a lot of us who weren't around in the 1970s when we saw the Public Records Act, when we saw abortion rights codified in this state. And hell, if the abortion rights thing came up, I'm sure there's a lot of people who signed on to these 6 initiatives who wouldn't have supported the initiative codifying abortion rights as they exist in Washington state. But this is about standing up for the process, and it's about reminding elected leaders who they work for. If you do not stand up for the process now, no one will be standing up for it when you have an initiative that you care about, that would codify rights that you care about. This is about putting the government in its place, reminding them that they work for us, that this process is guaranteed under the state constitution, and that they have an obligation under the state constitution to honor these initiatives by making them a top priority during the legislative session. It doesn't mean they have to pass them. It doesn't mean they have to vote for them, but they need to consider them. They should be giving them hearings. And so this Wednesday at 3:30 p.m., we're asking you to join us on the steps of the Washington State Capitol to demand that all 6 of these initiatives get a hearing. If they can give a hearing to a bill that would give Gary Ridgway the right to vote, they can give hearings to 6 initiatives that more than 800,000 voters in Washington state have supported. That is not only common sense, it is what our Constitution demands of them. And I know for working class people who are affected by these initiatives, who signed these initiatives, who would benefit if these initiatives become law, I know that Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. is a hard time. You know, we talk about these kind of the fringe activists in Seattle who seem to be able to get out any time of day, any day of the week, and find hundreds of people to come out and to protest and to block interstates for hours on end. And look, I don't know what their work schedule is like, so to speak. I do know that for working class people in this state, getting to Olympia in the middle of the week is difficult. But there is so much at stake. And I would also venture a guess that if you tell your boss that you're going down to Olympia to fight for lower taxes, to fight for public safety, to give police officers some common sense tools back to do their jobs, I bet you your bosses will give you the day off. No? Nicole goes, hey, you're not getting the day off, but we are going down together.
Some, I hope. I hope that would
I'm
be
telling
the
you, though,
reaction.
if you work for a company, you're like, hey, I'm trying to get the capital gains tax repealed. They're going to be like, head on down there.
Especially if your bosses Bill Gates are.
Yeah, we need, yes. We need all of you down there. You know, the Seattle Times did this article over the weekend about Brian Haywood of Let's Go Washington, who spent more than $6 million of his own money to make these initiatives possible. And the Seattle Times, I didn't think the article was terrible, but the Seattle Times wants to paint it as this is about one man. And this is what Democrats are doing. When Lori Jenkins, the Speaker of the House, said she was disappointed in what the initiative, saddened by what the initiative process has become, because a rich guy can buy his way onto the ballot. 2.5 million signatures proves that this is not about the whim of one man and the wishes of one man. Brian Haywood made it possible for the rest of us to sign those initiatives, to make our voice heard. But it is disingenuous for Democrats and for the Seattle Times, for that matter, to paint this entire thing as the wishes of one man. It at least represents the desires of more than 800,000 voters in this state who are freaking going broke under the weight of taxes. And you'll have Democrats continue to say that, hey, if you pass these initiatives, that it's going to take away investments in X, Y, and Z. These are investments they made because they took the money first. And then they said, how do we spend this money? Let's spend this money on all these things that we want, that we can go out to voters and say, hey, look at what we're doing for you. But it started by taking money that they never needed in the first place. So again, this Wednesday, 3:30 p.m., join me, our friends from Future 42. I know Jim Walsh, the chair of the Washington State Republican Party, will also be there. But if you signed any of these initiatives, I hope you can join us on the steps of the Capitol at 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday. If you didn't sign these initiatives, if you don't support these initiatives, but you support the process and you understand the importance of citizens having a check on power, I hope you can join us at the Washington State Capitol this Wednesday. And look, these things, even if the legislature does not act, these initiatives will go to voters. And I anticipate that that's what will happen anyway. I don't believe that Democrats in Olympia are going to all of a sudden give these hearings and then change their mind when they hear testimony from the public about the impacts of these policies and why they should be repealed. And then Democrats are going to go repeal some of their key policies and things that are bringing in billions of dollars to the state coffers. I don't think that's going to happen. But let some of the Washingtonians who are dramatically impacted by your policies show up in Olympia and testify in front of you about why they support these initiatives. Not only do you owe them that as public servants, which is what you're supposed to be, but you owe them that under the state constitution. So we will be talking more about this Wednesday rally all week long. And again, we need you all there. I know it's a slog. I know it's hard on a Wednesday. We're going to do the show, and then we're going to hightail it down to Olympia to be there. And I really hope as many of you as possible can be there as well. Okay, over the weekend, the Washington State Democrats made calling for a ceasefire in Gaza part of their platform, which is just wild to me. This is from I think she's still with a stranger, right? Hannah Krieg? Pretty sure she's still with a stranger. Hold on, I got to pull this up, Nicole, because I don't have it in front of me. Give me 1 second, give me 1 second, give me 1 second. Help me, Nicole. Help me. Here it is. Sorry, I got it. It was in the show sheet. Okay. Hannah Krieg, breaking the Washington State Democrats Central Committee, just passed a resolution, 75-54, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Wrap your mind around that for a second. The state party is spending its time passing a resolution to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. It says urgent resolution in support of continued U.S. funding of the UN agency providing relief to 1.9 million Palestinians and a ceasefire in Gaza to ease civilian suffering. I think the best response I heard to this was from our friend Matt, who said you can't even get a ceasefire at the Tukwila Costco, where there was a deadly shooting. You can't even stop the violence that's exploding on the streets of Washington State, and you believe as a state Democratic Party that you, are going to make a difference in calling for a ceasefire in Gaza? So not only is it an insane waste of time, I also, when I read Hannah Krieg's tweet, she said the Washington State Democrat Central Committee just passed a resolution, 75-54, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And then she tagged Senator Patty Murray, Rep. Adam Smith, Senator Maria Cantwell, and she said, the world and now your state party is watching. Yeah, we are watching. We're watching them prioritize their virtue signaling ahead of prioritizing the many crises in the state of Washington that they have made worse as a party. Under one-party rule, homelessness has gotten worse, drug abuse has gotten worse, the affordability crisis they claim to care so much about has gotten worse. I mean, crime is out of control. And you're, as you gather, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza part of your official party platform. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know about the priorities of Democrats, I don't know what else does. So after that happened, the American Jewish Committee in Seattle released a statement saying they were disappointed in it, that they hadn't been consulted, that to the best of their knowledge, other members of the Jewish community hadn't been consulted by state Democrats when it came to the resolution itself and how it was crafted, certainly not, in the vote. So we're joined today by Regina Sassoon-Friedland, who's with the AJC in Seattle, to talk about not only the disappointment in the vote, but also when you have the state Democratic Party that is putting its efforts behind a ceasefire in Gaza, some of the negative implications that can have here locally. Regina, welcome to unDivided.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be a guest here.
Yeah, I feel like I have been looking at these ceasefire resolutions the wrong way because, when the city of Seattle was trying to do it, just as an example, I looked at it as, oh gosh, what a silly virtue signaling waste of time. That's not going to do anything. I mean, Hamas isn't listening to what the Seattle City Council wants to do. But I feel like when I dismiss it like that, maybe I don't acknowledge the hurt that it can cause. So can you just react to the decision of the WSDCC to pass this resolution?
Yeah, and I think it's more, it's not even just use the word the hurt that it could cause. There's also the real consequences of what it causes. And one of the things I mentioned in the statement to you was that a synagogue, just hours after the Seattle City Council did this, a synagogue was just completely defaced and horribly vandalized. And a synagogue is not that it would make it any better, but it's not an institution where Israel is present anywhere. It's a Jewish institution. And it emboldened, and I would even say encourages behaviors like that. And we do see, I don't have the latest statistics of the uptick since October 7th, but it's rather, the numbers are huge, where we've had real impacts to the Jewish community in Washington state stemming from things like this. And there's no separation between something that's Jewish in nature, whether it's a community center type thing or a religious institution. They don't need to have the words Israel anywhere around it. And that's what we've been dealing with. So it was very upsetting that they proceeded with something like this, again, at the state level, without input from the Jewish community.
If they had sought input from the Jewish community and Jewish leaders, what would that input have been?
I think that we would have strongly discouraged anything with a unilateral ceasefire, because it might sound like a nice thing, we want peace in the region and all of that, but it has very little to do with peace. Basically, Israel has agreed to 4 ceasefires with Hamas during just the prior conflicts. And with every one of those, Hamas broke them. I mean, there was a ceasefire in place through October 6th. And on October 7th, they broke it. And that was broken. I think the last time they did anything was May of 2021. And it's not, this isn't just Jewish communities saying this. Military and policy experts have also warned that all a ceasefire would do would allow Hamas, which I think we need to remember and should be one of the things that's really prominent, is Hamas is a designated terror organization. This isn't a group of freedom fighters. And they're not just designated such by the United States, also by the EU, Canada, Japan, and many other countries. And that sometimes gets lost in the messaging that we're dealing with a group of terrorists. I think that, and they're state sponsored, like Hezbollah is, by Iran. So a unilateral ceasefire would just embolden them to regroup, and they have vowed, this is not hidden anywhere, that they would repeat October 7th many times. And I think it's very important that I don't want to use the cliche that keeps going around, when someone said, when they say something, believe them. But I think we need to believe them. There's no reason that we should have trust that this won't happen again. And that's what we're dealing with. So a ceasefire is basically it's just opening it up for Israelis to be killed, or anyone that's there. It's not sustainable, and it's not realistic.
Do you think it's a lack of knowledge of the situation that leads the state Democrats to do something like this? Or do you think it is sort of virtue signaling? I mean, because not all Democrats are calling for this. I mean, there have been some Democratic members of Congress from our state who have stood up against this sort of ceasefire sentiment and the, from the river to the sea chants and spoken out against those to their own detriment. I mean, Congressman Adam Smith's home was vandalized soon after he spoke out. I believe Congresswoman Kim Schreier has been targeted as well. So for the segment of the Democratic Party in Washington state who is in line with the sort of radical left beliefs on this, what do you think drives it?
I think for some, I don't know that I can say that just in a blank statement. And I think this is just for elected officials in that space and also for the general population that's out rallying for this daily or weekly. They don't understand what's going on. Some of them don't take the time to want to understand what's going on. They're just going to go along, like you said, you just mentioned. Are they virtue signaling? Yes, I think that everything to those that are well-intentioned, they might see this as a form of the oppressor and the oppressed, and they want to be on the side of the oppressed, and this is what they have to fight against. For those that know a little more about it, I think it comes down to just I think it's just pure, it gets to be anti-Semitic very quickly when you listen to a lot of the rhetoric. And we sometimes dance around that because they're still in a lot of those more radical spaces. They don't want to make a distinction between being so outwardly anti-Israel and anti-Semitism. They try to justify things by saying that the two can be separated. And that's not the case. I want to go back to what you said about the others that have really stood up. And you mentioned Congressman Adam Smith. We are grateful for what we have from state representatives, both from our U.S. senators, Murray and Cantwell, to almost our whole congressional delegation from Washington state that have been supportive of not trying to push for a unilateral ceasefire. There have been other times where they take a pause, and whether it's to let in humanitarian aid or other things like that. But overall, on the federal side, we've been in really good shape. We've also had the Jewish caucus in Olympia has been supportive. And then there's a bill right now. It's bipartisan with Senator Jesse Solomon and Senator John Braun. We're very grateful for things like that. And I personally, and I'll also say it just on behalf of American Jewish Committee and just also speaking for the Jewish community, those things go a long way, and we appreciate that. I think that it shows that they support the safety and security of Jews both at home here and around the world, and it doesn't go unnoticed. The others are, it's very problematic, and they keep driving these things, and they're not checking in with the community. They know they're choosing the outliers, or whatever you want to label them.
Yeah. Let's end with this, because we've seen this increasing, I would say, criminal civil unrest related to the kind of ceasefire crowd and the pro-Palestine crowd, in some instances, pro-Hamas crowd. I mean, gosh, they went from, ruining a Christmas tree lighting to blocking a bridge to blocking a freeway to blocking a sound transit station, and no consequences for them. And then you have something like this, where it is now the platform, essentially, of Washington state Democrats that they want a ceasefire in Gaza. So to what extent, you touched on it at the beginning, but I want to bring it full circle, to what extent do actions like this from a state party cover or contribute to some of these other actions that we're seeing in our community?
I think they contribute in the sense that they make these actions acceptable. And I think that if they don't get called out from leadership swiftly and unequivocally with, like you mentioned, consequences attached, they're going to increase, because you're not blocking them in any way, shape, or form. And instead of just not blocking it, I think it encourages the justification for these things, and I think it's a problem. I don't want to throw again, like I called out, there are plenty that are really trying.
Yes.
But the radical element is really a problem. And I think if they actually thought through some of the things they were saying, like on allegations of Israel committing genocide, genocide refers to acts that are committed with the intent to destroy, whether it's in part or whole of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. And the Palestinian population has quintupled since 1967. Those groups do not seem to be interested in facts. Their minds are made up and they just want to proceed with whatever narrative. And they also don't seem to want to recognize that Israel is not at war with the Palestinians, with Muslims or Arabs. They are fighting Hamas, the designated terror organization, whose charter not only calls for the annihilation of Israel, but for the slaughter of Jewish people where they are anywhere in the world. And I think one of the other points that rarely gets mentioned is that there is suffering with the Palestinian people in Gaza, but nobody mentions what is that from? Is this all the making of the Israeli government, as we're set to believe, or is Hamas responsible for a lot of that? I mean, they have prioritized destroying Israel before the safety and security of their own people, which is why they might store their ammunition in a hospital. They put children and the elderly and everyone else, they take cover and they use them as human shields. And it is a little bit maddening when no one is interested in hearing those things, because it's like some of their cries on all of these accusations and allegations seem to be about the suffering of the Palestinians. But what are you doing to try to bolster them, keep them safe and everything else, and let them be on a path to a better life?
Yeah. And if it were simply about human suffering, then you'd see them in the streets just as angry about what happened to Israelis. And they're not. They're focused solely on what's happening in Gaza, which it just doesn't, it's very hypocritical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Regina Sassoon-Friedland, we do appreciate your time and your expertise on this issue. And you're right. You know, I think what we'll do is follow up with all the Democratic leaders in our state who have not gone on the record to condemn some of this behavior and see what they have to say about this ceasefire resolution. So we'll do our diligence on that end. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so there you have it. A ceasefire in Gaza, now the official position of the Washington State Democrats Central Committee. Not all individuals at that committee voted in favor of it, but the majority obviously did. And we will follow up. You know, we have seen time and time again, I mean, Democrats, and we gave them credit there, and Regina gave them credit as well. You know, Congressman Adam Smith spoke out against some of this rank anti-Semitism that we're seeing. What happened? Well, the far left fringe went to his house and vandalized it. Same happened to Kim Schreier. She's been harassed, Congresswoman Kim Schreier, for speaking out about these, you know, from the river to the sea chants and standing up for Jewish Americans and standing up for Israelis as well. And she's been harassed as a result. And so you have this really bullying from the far left fringe for any Democrats who dare to speak out about some of the, what I would say, anti-Semitism, and then also some of the just, you know, gross misunderstanding or lack of understanding for what's actually happening in the conflict. And so we will follow up with Democrats. I mean, Jay Inslee he didn't say anything about, I mean, how many days went by before there was even any recognition from the governor's office about the blockade of I-5? You think for one second, if it were right-wing anti-Semites who were blocking I-5 for 6 hours, that the governor wouldn't have said something immediately as it was happening, that he wouldn't have ordered their arrest? Give me a freaking break. And so you have the Democrats who are standing up and doing the right thing at great personal risk to themselves and to their families. And then you have Democrats who might feel that way but are too cowardly to say anything because they're worried about angering a segment of their voting base. And that's a shame. And those individuals need to be called out for it as well. Okay, coming up next, a Bellevue teacher has joined the race for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction to challenge Chris Rakedal in 2024. We're just going to mention that quickly, although we will be looking to have him on the show in the coming weeks. I've been talking about my success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program. I went to the Roanoke conference out in Ocean Shores this weekend and met multiple people who are on the program as we speak and are seeing fantastic results. So I always love to hear those stories. You know, one of the important things here about Eastside Weight Loss Clinic, because I've said not every weight loss program is right for every person, but it isn't a fad diet and it's not magic. And if you're looking at a program that sounds too good to be true, and you've done as many diets as I have, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I mean, if you look at some of the programs out on the market where you've got to eat their prepackaged meals or their shakes for the rest of your life, and you're like, now I'm on the hook to spend money with you for months and months, if not years, and then when I stop eating your stuff, I gain all the weight back, or the drugs and injections, and then you spending money every single month, and what happens when you stop. This is not that. This is teaching you what to eat in the right portions to lose excess weight quickly and then keep it off for life without giving Eastside Weight Loss Clinic money every single month for the rest of your life. So to me, it really has been a life change. And I highly recommend scheduling a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team. Ask all the questions that you have to see if the program is right for you. EastsideWeightLossClinic.com, EastsideWeightLossClinic.com. All right, we talk a lot about the sad state of our public education system on this show. They're focused on, DEI and gender. We have some, I will tell you, doozy of stories about this. We just get more and more tips by the day from parents, and we have some real whoppers on the show tomorrow. We're waiting for some of it to play out before we talk about it, so we put it on hold until tomorrow, but we've just got some doozies. So I was happy to see a challenge to the current superintendent of public instruction, Chris Rakedal. Now look, Chris has come on the show, and I give him credit for that. I mean, he really has been willing to come on the show, to sit here, to at least let us ask the questions. I think sometimes he doesn't necessarily answer them, but he has not stood up against some of the blatant racism, in my estimation, in public schools with, segregating kids on the basis of race into groups because white kids are a threat to them, some of the gender ideology and all of that. And so I was waiting for Republicans to put someone in. I'm like, why haven't they entered anyone in the race? So Chad Magendanz, who is a former state lawmaker, he's a current Bellevue school teacher, he's a former president of the Issaquah School Board. He's also a Navy veteran. He announced over the weekend that he is going to be joining the race. I know Chad because he was one of my state representatives back when he was in Olympia, and he was actually at Roanoke this weekend where he made that announcement. And so we are working to get Chad on the show to talk about, but it was funny because his campaign announcement said he's going to focus on quality, restoring actual learning to education. I'm like, imagine that. You would have a superintendent of public instruction who's like, hey, I'm going to focus on actually teaching our kids stuff.
Making sure they pass a couple tests without the notes.
Oh my gosh. So that is a race that we're going to be very, very focused on covering. And like I said, we'll have Chad in, but we'll also invite Chris back in as a candidate to talk about some of the things that have happened since the last time we had him in. Some of these stories. I think the last time we had him in, we had done some stories on the Olympia School District, and he really didn't condemn some of this gender ideology being pushed on kids, some of these crazy lessons in sex ed and books and stuff. So we look forward to having them both in to make their case as to why they are the best person to take our state's public education system out of the gutter, frankly. So something to look forward to. But yeah, Republicans, it was like, you have the best gubernatorial candidate who's going to be at the top of the ticket that you've ever had. You better have some good down ballot candidates. And I was like, why have they not entered the race for superintendent of public instruction? Well, I guess it was because they were waiting for Chad to enter it. Okay. So you may recall Seattle passed a new drug ordinance after the state, it was deemed unconstitutional, our felony drug possession statute. Then at the state level, they watered it down to a gross misdemeanor. And then you had an effort from cities to bring parity between their laws that their police departments could enforce and the state law. And Seattle just fumbled it all over the place, as they often do. There was an effort back at the beginning of the summer. You may recall, it's actually something we have an ongoing lawsuit over public records about, but Andrew Lewis killed a common sense bill that would have allowed police more ease to arrest people who are using drugs out in the open. And then it got watered down and they did pass it. So in Seattle, with this new drug law on the books, Seattle police technically have the power to arrest someone. I know it sounds like they didn't before. No, they technically have the power to arrest someone who's out shooting up fentanyl out in the open in downtown Seattle. And so it gave them that ability to make those contacts yet again, which is good. But despite making arrests, no one's getting booked into jail. Fox 13 had an update on this. Seattle police arrest dozens under city's new drug law, but violators aren't going to jail. And this just reflects the utter breakdown in the system. According to this Lauren Donovan story, under the law, urging people into treatment is always the first option offered by officers making an arrest. But for those who choose the stick instead of the carrot, jail time over rehab, and then they're out with the officer on a ride along, the officer says that officers have to let them walk free. The inability for SPD to book misdemeanor arrests into the jail, in my opinion, the officer told Fox 13, makes it hard to get that return on investment. But the number of people jailed specifically for violating the new drug rules remains zero. Yeah. So the officer said they fear it's just a matter of time until hardcore users find out the ordinance is an empty threat, after which he says they're just basically out the door. So that's the thing, is you can pass laws, man. You can pass laws saying whatever you want, but if you're not going to enforce it, then it doesn't make a difference at all. If you're not going to be able to enforce it. I mean, one, Seattle police don't have a lot of officers, so the idea that they're going to be able to spend an awful lot of time out making contacts with people who are using drugs, that's just not realistic. And they're certainly not going to spend their time doing it if that person isn't going to be booked into jail. So now you have a situation where you can have a guy or girl, whatever, shooting up on 3rd and Pine around all the tourists, whatever it is. Officers go up, offer them treatment, carrot and a stick, give them the carrot. They say, no, screw off, kick rocks. And then they're like, okay, well, we're going to arrest you. Well, they arrest them and then they don't get booked into jail. So it's only a matter of time, as this officer told Fox 13, only a matter of time before these drug users know that the law that was passed means nothing and that truly nothing has changed. So, and this goes, for the state level too. You can propose all sorts of bills, and gosh, you can have some of these Republican bills to strengthen laws that get passed, but if they're not going to be enforced, then it really doesn't mean anything at all at the end of the day. So that's something we're going to continue to track, but I don't know what can be done to fix that. I mean, obviously King County needs to take misdemeanor jail bookings. I mean, unless you have, I know at some point the city attorney, Ann Davison, had sort of this agreement for repeat habitual offenders that they were going to be booked into jail if they came in. So I don't know if that agreement has been eroded. Now, I will say the one continued upside of actually having this law on the books is sometimes when Seattle police go out and they do see someone using drugs and they approach them because of this law, they can run their name and then maybe they have a felony warrant. And so maybe they can send them to jail at least on the felony warrant, but they're not going to be booked on just drug use in general if that's the only crime. Okay, coming up next in our segment, Unbelievable, we talked about the horrific death of a 3-week-old baby in Port Townsend left in a bush, allegedly by the child's father. Well, now a state lawmaker who is responsible for a bill that was passed a couple years ago in Olympia that's being blamed for that infant's death is on a... Not an apology tour, quite the opposite, is on an excuse tour. So we'll get to the excuses that she's giving and the deflection of blame that this lawmaker is giving as opposed to acknowledging that that law needs to be fixed. So our segment Unbelievable coming up next. First, right now, a lot of people are dealing with rates jumping with policy renewals for insurance. You might have experienced this as well. And it's because of the state of the insurance industry. There's been a huge uptick in claims, sometimes over crime. I mean, crime has certainly shot through the roof. And so there's people who are making a relatively small claim and then they get dropped from their insurance, or they made a small claim and they go to renew and now their rates have gone way up. And if you're trying to navigate that market by yourself right now, that's tough. And that's why I highly recommend taking the First Mark Challenge. It's free. You got First Mark Insurance, a local company that's been in this for a long time, that can shop the market for you, that can make recommendations for you, that can help you if you get into a difficult position where your carrier wants to drop you, and they do it all for free. You never pay them a dime. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. Here's Dave Taylor, the CEO of First Mark.
We could have a client come to us today that maybe just had a comp loss, so like a windshield loss.
Sure. Right?
Just a little ding in your windshield. And they come in and we don't have a carrier that will take them.
For a ding in their windshield.
Right, for a ding in the windshield, right? And this is changing, right? So we have some carriers that are starting to loosen up already, but I'm just saying there's never been a better time to be a broker because you need multiple carriers to find solutions for your clients these days. You can't just have one carrier because they might not want your client.
Yeah, you guys, there is no downside to this. Mike and I think we spent a couple hours in total doing the First Mark Challenge, bringing all of our insurance needs. It was a little longer for us because we were just about to get married. So we didn't have like one household. We had our individual insurance plan. So that took a little bit longer, but it's going to take about an hour. You can do it virtually. Go over your current insurance, your insurance needs. Tell them what your goals are. Maybe you need to save a little bit of money. Maybe you need better insurance. Mike and I were underinsured. They'll go out, they'll shop the market for you. And then from there on out, man, it is smooth sailing. If you ever have an insurance-related claim, any issues, you just call First Mark and they handle it for you at no cost. I mean, people, I'm trying to help you save money and get better insurance. It's easy. FirstMarkInsurance.com. FirstMarkInsurance.com. They work for you. All right, a state representative who is responsible for a bill that the goal was apparently to keep families together is now saying that that bill is not to blame for the death of a 3-week-old baby in Port Townsend or other deaths that have been happening in the foster care system across his state. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Man, I've never seen anything quite like this. Representative Lillian Ortiz Self is going on a gaslighting tour. So last week, there was a lot of coverage about a 3-week-old baby that was left in a bush in Port Townsend, allegedly by its father, who's been arrested. The dad is a felon, known drug user who doesn't really have a stable place to live. And besides just the horrific fact that you had a 3-week-old left dead in a bush, you also had this added frustration that the Department of Children, Youth, and Families allowed this child to be in the care of its father, despite all these things that they knew about his issues and his drug use, et cetera. I mean, the baby was born with fentanyl in its system, allegedly because of its mother. And then DCYF said, yeah, we can put the child in the custody of its father, who also uses drugs and was homeless, unstably housed is sort of how they referred to it, like was kind of maybe couch surfing, didn't have a set place to live.
Family member or somebody let him stay with them when he had the baby or something. But.
So unreal, and this is attributable to, without a doubt, House Bill 1227, which was referred to as the Keeping Families Together Act, which passed on a bipartisan basis back in 2021 and took effect this summer. And the goal, I mean, when you say keeping families together, I mean, of course, reasonable people want, when appropriate, kids to be able to stay at home. But there's a lot of reasons why a child might need to be removed from a home by DCYF, abuse, neglect, and yes, I think common sense would dictate that substance abuse is one of those reasons. And so what this bill did, and I'll get to the ins and outs of it in a moment, is it raised the standard for when the state can remove a child from the home to imminent harm. And drug use in and of itself around a kid in a home was not deemed imminent harm. And now, in light of not only the death of this 3-week-old child, but some other horrible deaths that have happened with families involved in the system, now there are efforts from both parties this legislative session to try to reel that bill back in. But that's why I've never seen anything quite like this. Representative Lillian Ortiz Self, whose name was on the bill, and she's not the only one. It passed with bipartisan support, so she's not the only one, I think, to blame here. But she had her staff film a video of her with what we presume is her staff asking her questions, where she is completely deflecting blame from the Keeping Families Together Act and totally gaslighting people into thinking that that law has nothing to do with the death of this 3-week-old child.
And the statistics we were getting back that over 60% of the children removed were removed over neglect situations versus physical harm, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, and that those with neglect oftentimes had to do with homelessness, substance abuse, poverty. The law never touches that you can't remove a child for homelessness or substance abuse or poverty. It says that can't be the only factor.
Well, even if that's what it said, that's stupid, right? Even if that's what it said, it's stupid, but she's just wrong. And she's totally gaslighting because, and I'll get into what DCYF said, but I would also ask the representative, why is your own party trying to fix it this year then? There's a Democrat bill from Representative Travis Couture that would make it so that illegal substance abuse of any kind in the home is in and of itself enough reason to remove a child. And then Democrats have a bill that's a little bit watered down that would make it easier to remove a child specifically if there's fentanyl use in the home. So Representative Ortiz-Self, I don't understand, if this isn't to blame for what's happening to these kids, then why is your own party trying to fix it? Why is your own party trying to fix it? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Just wild. Like, oh, I'm going to sit here and get questioned by my staff, who I'm sure we're asking real hardball questions, and then put out this video on social media to clear the air. Ridiculous.
And she did talk to Fox 13, but said pretty much the same thing. Just said it, oh, no, it was already like that.
No, it wasn't. And so this is from DCYF's own website, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, talking about what HB 1227 did, which, again, it was passed by the state legislature. Actually, it was in 2022, right? Sorry, not 2021. And then it went into effect July 1st of last year. It says on its own website, what does HB 1227 change? Well, it increased the standard for police and hospitals to take a child into protective custody, increased the standard for a court to issue a pickup order directing DCYF or law enforcement to take a child into protective custody, increase the standard for the court to order that a child should be removed from the home at a shelter care hearing to imminent risk of physical harm. The evidence must show a causal relationship between conditions in the home and the threat of harm, and it requires the court to weigh the harm of removal. And what it said is that you can be using drugs as a parent, you just have to have a safety plan. So like if I'm a fentanyl addict and I've got a kid that I don't want to lose because probably the state has given me a bunch of money and I want to keep that money coming in, and if my kid's taken away, then I'm not going to keep that money coming in, or gifts that the state gives me that I'm going to turn around and sell for drugs, that I would just have to say, like, okay, let's say I'm using drugs and I'm going to tell the court, my plan is that when I'm actively abusing fentanyl, I'm going to drop the kid off at my aunt's house. And then that's a safety plan. That's crazy. And this argument that she makes there that, like, the Keeping Families Together Act, they said it was about, making sure that your kid wasn't taken from you because you were poor. DCYF isn't taking kids because you're poor. There are a lot of poor families in Washington who are perfectly good parents, in case that needs to be stated. But yes, extreme poverty can lead to neglect. So if you're extremely poor and you're not feeding your kids, you're not capable of feeding your child, or you're not going to a food bank to get food for your child to eat, that's not taking your kid away because you're poor. That's taking your kid away because of neglect. And they also said that the bill was passed to fix racial disparities, that you had families being separated at higher rates if they weren't white. And it's like, okay, but was there cause to separate that child from their parent? So if you had higher rates of Black individuals, for instance, getting children taken away because of substance abuse, like, I'm sorry, you can't manipulate the system to say, we can't have outcomes like that, so let's leave kids in the care of drug-abusing people. That is wild to me, this weird video that she put out. I can't even believe it. So anyway, this was the subject of our Sundays with Subscribers episode yesterday, and I just want to play a couple clips. We had on a foster parent named Shannon, who's been, in the foster care system helping kids like this for some time, and she is just really beside herself about what to do about laws like the Keeping Families Together Act, and there's just a growing frustration among foster parents.
You can be in active use and we're still going to send your children back. So let's make a safety plan. Well, safety plans include things like you should use when your partner's not using, and I've heard this in court. This is a valid safety plan, that you cannot use at the same time. You can continue to be an addict, but you need to tell us who you're going to leave your baby with when you choose to use or you choose to relapse.
Hold on.
So a lot of danger in that. And we're seeing kids dying, and we're seeing kids getting returned. Very vulnerable children are the highest fatality rate right now, like our small infants, because we cannot put them into care any longer. So you can have a long history of, maybe you have 7 kids in care in a dependency. So maybe you have 2, maybe you have 3. Those children are each individual cases. So if you have a brand new baby, there's no record of them being harmed. There's no record of you being neglectful to them. So that is a totally separate case. So you can take that baby home with your safety plan.
Even if you have a record of not of posing a danger to your other children. So a new baby,
Yes.
none of that would follow you.
Not since July, not since
Wow.
1227 passed in July.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear from a foster parent some of what they deal with and the real consequences and the ridiculousness. I mean, if you're a parent and you've, let's just say, abused your 3 other kids and DCYF has taken them and you have another kid, that record that you have doesn't have anything to do with whether you can have access, whether you get to parent that child. That's crazy. That makes no sense. And Shannon had also pointed out that, eventually they got to keep giving these kids back to parents, keep giving these kids back to parents. And then eventually the state will be like, okay, you've had a lot of chances. You're not fit to parent. And they'll go back to the foster home and they're worse off than they ever were. And so their hope of actually getting back on track and having a healthy upbringing has just been hindered by the state of Washington and its desire at any cost to keep families together. No one wants to keep families apart. But the goal is let's get the parents help. Let's get them whatever kind of help they need to be a better parent if it's possible. I mean, abuse is sort of a different situation. And then let's get the kid back into a healthy, happy home. So I want to play another clip, and we try not to play too much of what airs on Sundays with subscribers, but this clip of Representative Travis Couture, a Republican from Allen, it's too powerful to leave behind a paywall. We had him on because he has a bill that would fix the Keeping Families Together Act. I have never seen this man more royally pissed off in my life. So here's part of our interview with Representative Couture.
We should be able to course correct. We should be able to look at it and say, yeah, we messed up. Let's do something different. But there's pushback. And I keep asking the question, how many kids have to die in order to preserve this ideology that the state is pursuing, especially the Department of Children, Youth, and Families? And let me be clear about something, Brandi. 1227 was passed, and I met up with social workers over the summer. You know what they call that bill? The dead baby bill. Judges sometimes call that the dead baby bill. I'm sorry, if you're on black tar heroin, if you're on meth, if you're on fentanyl, if you're on those hard drugs, you don't have the capacity to care for a child anymore and then argue to any sane person that you are adequately providing for them and not abusing and neglecting them in some way. And of course, developmentally, babies and toddlers are running around and they're putting things in their mouth and they're exploring their world. And sadly, often, as we saw in Port Townsend with the 3-week-old baby that was tossed into the bushes like it wasn't even alive. Like it wasn't even alive. I'm so pissed about it. And
every right to be pissed about it.
That baby was born addicted to fentanyl. About this time, almost this time last year, a woman, a mother, on meth, under CPS supervision, tortured and murdered her 3-year-old son and left his body next to his sibling. There was blood on the walls, splattered on the walls, and taser burns all over this child's body. And DCYF, it's evil. I don't use that word a lot. It's evil. And what are we protecting here? Equity? Are we protecting an ideology, the absolute furthest pendulum swing from the war on drugs you could possibly get? Aren't we supposed to be protecting the kids and making the family whole again? But we're not. We're not doing that. It's a total vacuum of leadership. It's total radical ideology. But this isn't something like, hey, you raise my taxes, that makes me mad. This is the innocent life of a child that already had a slim chance to probably begin life with, and we had a chance to do something about it. And if anything our state government can do, it is protecting the most vulnerable people in our society, especially ones that can't defend themselves. And I'm just sick of it. I'm at war about this. We tried last session to pass the Oakley-Carlson Act for little Oakley Carlson that was ripped from perfectly good foster parents and sent back to her drug-abusing parents, who were also criminals. And then she went missing, probably murdered by her parents, or so we suspect. And I watched your original segment on this before, and I'm crying with you. Because for a year now, I go home and I think about this. I'm an elected official and I am the assistant ranking member of this Human Services Youth and Early Learning Committee. Even though I don't support what's happening and I fight against it every day, I hold my portion of responsibility for what happens to these kids. And I wish everyone felt the same way about being responsible for what happens as a result of their policies in the state. But you know what happens? DCYF and the Office of Children Ombuds, Family and Children Ombuds, they send out the fatality reports. And the kids' names are redacted. They're just a black line, a government statistic to these people. And some people say, hey, calm down, you can't save them all. Well, hell, can we try? Can we just try to save some of them? Because some of this is common sense. Only in Olympia do people believe this, that it's totally cool to keep kids in homes where there's hard drugs present that could kill them. No matter how traumatic that removal might be, it's less traumatic than being dead. It's less traumatic than being dead. But no one, including DCYF, seems to think that. And they've said it multiple times. Over and over, they said the quiet part out loud. But no one believes that. No one in the real world believes this. It's dangerous, and it has to end.
Wow. That part of our conversation with State Representative Travis Couture on Sundays with Subscribers, which is available to our subscribers on Patreon, Locals, and X. You can sign up at undividedpod.com to watch that full episode. If you're a public servant and you don't care that much, what are you doing? I just let him talk. I usually don't let people go on my show, but I was like, holy moly. I've never seen, I don't think any lawmaker that fired up about anything. And if we're not fired up about dead kids, then what are we fired up about? And like he said, this is just common sense stuff. No one's saying that if you abuse drugs that you can't parent your child one day, but we are saying that if you're abusing drugs in the home around your child, and that child could die if they ingest those drugs, that child's life could be altered forever if they ingest those drugs, then yeah, that kid cannot be in that home. And you got to get better. You got to get better for your child, and giving you a little bit of space where you don't have to worry about parenting an infant while you try to get better. Maybe that's the best thing for everyone, to actually keep families together in the long run. Because it's not keeping families together when a dad puts his dead baby in a bush. Now, I understand that there are some challenging issues here related to government overreach. And when is it enough for the state to come in and take your child away from you? And so I made this the subject of our daily subscriber show poll. I said, should illegal drug abuse in the home be enough cause for a child to be temporarily placed in foster care or in the care of another family member? Most of you are saying yes. Andrea says, for me, that depends on the status of both parents. As a child, I was abused by one drug-using parent, but my other parent did not use drugs and did not know. I think if there is a capable parent, the drug-using offender should be removed from the home and the child allowed to remain with the other parent. Jill says, yes, at some point in that child's life, they will join the parents in that drug use. I experienced that as a teenager with the friends' parents. They let the kids that came over do whatever they wanted because they did it all too. George says, it's a little more nuanced than yes or no. Caseworkers should be able to determine if the user is a threat to the child. In the recent case, the worker knew that the drug-abusing father was a danger to the child. He eventually apparently murdered, and that's alleged. He's been arrested for kidnapping, and I think they're waiting on a cause of death, which I don't know that they've determined just yet. And I think it was a foster parent for this 3-week-old who spoke out on the news as well and said that they didn't want to give this baby to the dad, and they knew. And the foster families know. They know whether it's a good situation or a bad situation, and their opinion in that moment should be given a lot of weight by DCYF. Over on X, Postal Sage says, if someone cannot control their illegal drug use and are harming themselves, how can we be assured that they will control themselves and not harm a child? Marcelo says that they do believe yes, but a family member should be the first alternative, not the foster care system. Let me read a couple over on Locals. Weiss Castle says, sorry, but no old law should be an excuse for giving a baby up in a situation like this without at least some fight. No new law is going to put common sense back in a dysfunctional government system. Tina says, imminent danger means about to happen, not that it already happened. I think logic tells us that there is danger that is about to happen with fentanyl use. Come on, people. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, fentanyl, they preach it. It can kill you in the tiniest little portions. And I mean, it's like the hypocrisy on this whole issue is stunning to me. For example, 5599, Senate Bill 5599, which passed last year, says that if your kid wants to get some sort of health care that you're not okay with as a parent, let's say they want an abortion, let's say they want gender affirming care, as the left calls it, they can run away to a shelter and the state will not tell the parents where you are. Is that keeping families together? And in that law, there is no burden to prove that the parents are abusive, that the parents are neglectful, that they're even bad parents. But they dare to want to know whether their child is going to get gender hormone therapy. And for that and that alone, the state will give the child shelter. And DCYF will be notified, but DCYF won't tell the parents where their kid is. So you got a bill like that for the sake of gender ideology, where you're separating kids from loving homes. And then you've got a bill like this where you're saying we're going to keep families together by sending infants, helpless children, back to drug-abusing parents? You tell me how that makes any sense in the world. That is mental. And it's all around ideology. The life of children be damned. Crazy stuff. Okay. Before we get to a little national news, we're not going very far today, though, just dipping down to Oregon to talk about a study they did on the impact of a new proposed tax and how the study didn't go the way they wanted to. So in Oregon, they just hid it from the public. Sounds familiar. Sounds like something the state of Washington would do. But first, if you've been thinking about putting your home on the market, interest rates were pretty high in 2023. And so that really cooled down the market. But with the Fed promising to drop interest rates in 2024, we could see the market pick back up. Here's our friend Wes Jones with sellwithwes.com. Where do you think interest rates need to be at to really get the market back up and humming again?
I think if we get into the high fives, that is going to be a real breakthrough. When we were at 7 and now into the high sixes, that brought in another section of buyers. And if we get that into the low sixes or high fives, I think things will really start to move again. And, we're already seeing multiple offers in a lot of different price points and, different cities. It's going to make housing more affordable, and it's going to bring more buyers out into the market again. What's that going to do? It's going to push the prices back up. So one of the things that I do see happening, or could see happening in 2024, is all of the gains that we lost in 2022. I think there's a really good chance we make those up in 2024.
Yeah, and so a big thing he said is if you're even contemplating putting your home on the market at some point in 2024, get a hold of him sooner rather than later, because what he'll do is he'll give you a market analysis. And then if you need maybe cosmetic updates to your home, they can help you do that through the Listing Boost concierge service. And you don't have to pull the trigger right away, but the more time that Sell with Wes has, that Wes Jones and his team have at sellwithwes.com to get your home ready, the better, because you want to make sure it hits the market and it's raring to go. So sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. Start by using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, dipping outside of Washington state, just down to Oregon. So, of course, liberal states, they always want to find any way they can to bring more money in. And often they'll be like, oh, these taxes are for you. We gotta do these taxes to help you. We're the government and we're here to help. And so they were contemplating an increased tax on booze, so a bigger sin tax essentially. And there's always this conversation about like taxes on cigarettes, for instance. Gosh, I don't know what it is in Washington, but I remember when taxes on cigarettes went up in Minnesota, and my dad was just irate about it. And we didn't have a lot of money as it was, and he worked on and off. And so it was like, it did actually hurt his ability to smoke, which I was glad about, because he simply did not have the money to pay the increased taxes on cigarettes. But anyway, in Oregon, they were studying, the Oregon's healthcare authority, studying increasing the tax on booze to see, because they were like, we'll do this for the purpose of definitely not just taking more money into the state coffers, but we want to reduce problem drinking. So the issue is they did the study, the results weren't really what they hoped for, and so they just buried the results of the study. This is from Oregon Live. Oregon never publicized a study it funded that found higher beer and wine taxes would barely stem heavy drinking. According to the Oregon Live, Oregon's health authority already knows the answer, but it's kept the findings of a $60,000 study it commissioned hush-hush. The agency never publicly released the 2021 Eco Northwest study, which had clear findings about how helpful raising alcohol taxes would be to curbing heavy drinking and its terrible impacts. The takeaway? Not very. Researchers said this change would reduce overall alcohol consumption by about 5% among the drinking population. It could also raise upward of $240 million in new taxes for the state. But the impacts on problem drinking would be less pronounced. Oregon's heaviest drinkers would likely lower their consumption about 2%, the authors said. Some heavy beer and wine drinkers would switch to lower priced alcohol, they said. So again, when you have like Seattle's soda tax, where they're like, this will reduce soda consumption, and that's why we just have to tax you. Even though those taxes will disproportionately hurt the poor who tend to drink much more soda, we've got to do it. It's for your own good. And then did it do anything? Of course it didn't do anything. So here you've got a government system in Oregon, the health authority, spend $60,000 on a study to try to justify squeezing an additional $240 million out of people. They don't get the result they want, so they just bury the dang thing. Sounds very Washingtonian of them. Not a surprise. Okay, we'll get to your questions and comments, and then a really cute sanity check to close the day. I told Nicole I want our sanity checks to be more positive, so she put a real cute one in, which we'll end the show with. Some kids in Olympia. Can you beat kids who are participating in the political process?
A good teacher.
And a good teacher.
A great teacher that we'd like to highlight.
Oh, see, we don't think all teachers are crazy ideologues. But first, I had Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital on the show on Thursday, as we always do, and we talked about the capital gains tax because the initiative to repeal it had just been certified by the Secretary of State's office. And he shares my belief, and I think the belief of a lot of people, that, Democrats have said the capital gains tax is about the richest of the rich and gains in excess of $250,000. But there have already been efforts by Democrats to lower the threshold of who would qualify to have to pay a tax on capital gains, to lower the threshold, to make it on the sale of your home, for instance. So here's Zach Abraham.
The Washington State Legislature, I'm sure that they'd love to have a state income tax, a state cap gains tax. They'd try to do it all. But another part of me is thinking that they're going to try to get as onerous and as, confiscatory as they can possibly get on all things tax related, almost in an effort to create pain to get us to switch to an income tax.
Yep.
Right? So, hey, here, well, you know what? We can get rid of all these other taxes you guys don't like. Let's just replace it with an income tax. Like, I don't know, Brandi, you'd be more in the know, but that's what it feels like to me that they're doing. It's highway robbery.
Yeah, amen, Zach. I agree. It's highway robbery. Zach and I have been talking a lot about managing your risk, especially in 2024. You only get one retirement, and there's a lot of risk out there, from the election to continued global unrest, the rising cost of living, unforeseen market fluctuations. 2024 could be a wild ride. So protecting your retirement portfolio with active risk management is critical. I suggest having a free Know Your Risk portfolio review with Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Advisor at Bulwark Capital and host of Know Your Risk Radio podcast. Bulwark's Know Your Risk portfolio review, it's a great way to see if you're overexposed to risk. And so you really can't afford, especially if you're close to retirement or in retirement, to have some passive management of your retirement portfolio. You have to have someone in there actively managing your risk. So schedule your free risk review at knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Okay, let's get to your questions and comments from the live stream, shall we? Reagan Morey on the protest, what we're doing in Olympia on Wednesday, again, 3:30 p.m. Please let us know if you plan to attend and take as many friends as you possibly can. Reagan says, it's truly amazing how often they totally disregard our state constitution, yet they say conservatives don't respect our democracy. And I think that's the thing that gets me, and where I want to pull reasonable people left, right, and center into this conversation. If we don't protect and defend our initiative process today, then we won't have it tomorrow. And again, I go back to the wide array of things that our initiative process has accomplished in this state, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, solidifying abortion rights in Washington, the Public Records Act, as much as Democrats try to get around that as well, same-sex marriage, certain gun control measures in 2018. So if you've supported any of those, I mean, you think about where we'd be if the initiative process wasn't there, if our citizenry didn't have that to put a check on power or to push through things that they wanted that lawmakers hadn't accomplished yet. And so even if you don't care about any of these initiatives, you don't like them, you're opposed to them, you didn't sign them, if you don't stick up for the initiative process today, it will not be here for us tomorrow. And that will be handing over one of the last checks we have on one-party rule. I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to give a party that already has full control of state government. I'm not ready to hand over the power of initiative to them, and that's what they want, and we just cannot allow it. Rick Johnson, I feel like a minion, a peasant protesting on the Capitol steps. We the people own that house. We should be going inside, and legislators should have the guts to meet us and hear us. Yeah, I hope there are some lawmakers who are willing to come out. I wouldn't put money on any Democrats coming out to speak to the crowd about why they haven't given these things a hearing yet. And like I said, make no mistake, these are going to be on the ballot in November. But these were first and foremost initiatives to the legislature to give lawmakers an opportunity to hear from people who signed those initiatives and to really stop and consider, okay, why are there 800,000 voters who signed at least one of these? Maybe our policies aren't great. Maybe our policies are really, really hurting working class people, and maybe we should listen to them. And maybe we should remember, why are you laughing?
Yeah, that's cute.
That's cute. Nicole's like, ha ha ha.
Because I think they have considered it, and they're like, it's Brian's fault.
Brian, yeah, and it's all like Brian Haywood. And, you know,
He's
the funny thing about
misinforming.
that, and actually Brian pointed this out in it wasn't a rebuttal he did to the Seattle Times did this big, long expose. I thought it was like fair for the Times. But like there's some things in there where I'm like, okay, clearly there's some bias seeping through. But one of the things that Brian pointed out when they say it's about a rich guy trying to, you know, get out of paying taxes, he's like, the amount of money I'd have to, like, the amount of like assets I'd have to sell to ever be taxed $6 million in the capital gains tax. He's like, I'm spending way more money on these initiatives than I ever would have had to pay for the capital gains tax.
Right.
So how can you say I'm doing this to enrich myself when I'm spending millions of dollars? And the only initiative they have where they can make that accusation is capital gains. It's like, what, Brian, we said this on the show before. You really think that Brian Haywood cares if he's paying 50 cents more per gallon at the pump? Absolutely not. And so it's disingenuous, but it doesn't even matter. He didn't sign his name 2.6 million times. He didn't do that himself. Washingtonians, more than 800,000 unique voters, signed their names to those initiatives. And those are the people who Democrats are disrespecting by saying this is about a rich man trying to save money. It's ridiculous.
So infuriating.
It is really wild. On the ceasefire thing with the state Democratic Party, Grass CPA says, I would love for our lawmakers to list the names of those in favor of Hamas over Israel. Let them be judged by the company they keep. And that is what reasonable Democrats are doing when they don't say anything. And there have been some who have, but when you just are passive and you sort of shut up about it, I'm sorry, but this is now the platform of your party. This is now the platform of the Washington State Democratic Party. So if you don't agree, now is the time to speak up. On DCYF, Weiscastle says, new laws for DCYF won't fix it if we don't understand the problem. Who signed off on giving a baby to a drug-addicted homeless felon father? Why? Their number one job was to fight for this baby. Again, but it's all in the name of like equity, of ideology. And I mean, look at how they've approached substance abuse. They let people sit on 3rd and Pine or in other communities across the state and just sit there with a needle in their arm and kill themselves. You know, a really good, when I was at Roanoke this weekend, I hosted a panel on the drug crisis. And our friend Ginny Burton, who's like a 17-time felon, longtime drug addict, was on the panel. And she said, would we ever let someone as a society sit on the sidewalk and stab themselves a bunch of times with a knife and not intervene? No, we would not do that. Mm-hmm. Yet we let them sit there and stab themselves and put into their body a deadly drug. And so the way that Democrats have taken a hands-off approach to the drug crisis in general, that is what you're seeing reflected here, is they want to keep families together even if someone's using fentanyl, but God forbid your kid wants, gender care and you're a great parent, but you just have some issues with that. Well, we're going to hide your kid from you. It's mental. It really is mental.
It's infuriating to me that she went on the defense first. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, is there a misinterpretation of this law that I should address and that I should make sure that judges and prosecuting attorneys know about and that DCYF is doing something about to clarify? No, let me just explain why it wasn't me. Wasn't me.
I didn't do anything. No,
they just don't know what they're doing.
And
okay, well, go fix it.
Right, because obviously it's happening a lot. For foster parents to speak out, for the prosecutor in that case to speak out. Travis Couture, he wasn't even a lawmaker when that bill was voted on. And even he's saying, hey, we need to fix this. We should be able to admit when we were wrong. And he wasn't even the one who was wrong, right? He didn't even vote on it.
I wouldn't vote on it because he's like, I don't know what they were told. And that seems to be the thing, is that nobody was told the real implications of this. And maybe they have these hearings, and sometimes I do wonder what really gets through during these hearings, because it's who volunteers to go and speak up, right? But maybe they need to do some more research. Maybe there needs to be some more studies that go into this, and know what they're signing when they sign it.
Well, you can have something that sounds good in principle, and I think a lot of conservatives probably looked at this as a parental rights issue. Like, let's not take kids unduly away from their parents. But if it's not translating in practice, then you have to go back and fix it. We're talking about children's lives, right? So we have to put our egos aside. I know that there's a lot of lawmakers in Olympia who really hate to admit that they were wrong. We see it happen not very frequently, but there are now 2 bills, one of them is better than others, but 2 bills to fix this. So for this lawmaker to say, well, this isn't what it was supposed to do, then why are there bills to fix it? Just stop.
And I mean, maybe it's DCYF scared of what happens if they do take a kid and it's not the right situation. So maybe we need to make sure that they know how to address the situation. Like, go to the expert. Here's how so it's not on you if you took them a little too early or a little too late. You're not scared of being fired or being sued or whatever it is. If there's a fear, because that's what we're hearing, is that there is fear in people, and that's why these decisions are getting made. So their fear and their, let's follow the book, and their ideology is all coming before lives of kids.
Lives of kids.
It's
then
crazy.
You got a baby dead in a bush.
We're not letting this go. I refuse.
No. There's a lot that we have to talk about with this particular bill. And we've been hearing a lot from foster parents. And so we're hoping, among all the other things going on, that this can get, hey, you want Gary Ridgway to vote? How about we also, save babies' lives?
Right.
I don't know. I know your priorities are really screwed up in Olympia. But, okay, let's see. Greg Oleka says, kudos to Travis for his passion. I hope he knows there are a lot of people who feel the same way he does. Country Guy, neglect is a good thing. Does it help kids develop and mature? I guess I get confused easily. You don't get confused. Lawmakers get confused.
I mean, she literally says that. It's just that neglect can't be the only reason that they get taken. Neglect, like they're putting themselves in danger. So neglect can mean your child has access to knives, or so something has to happen where they hurt themselves, hopefully not critically, but it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. All right, good questions and comments. Thank you, everyone. Going late today. I've been saying
your hair too. Everybody says your hair is on point.
I know.
Today.
I saw the comments, but I'm like, man, we're talking about dead babies. I don't want to talk about compliments
to
on my hair. Thank you, though. Thank you. Lighten it up.
Yes.
Thank you. I have had some rough hair days lately, so I appreciate you noticing the good ones. Okay, in our closing sanity check, some kids testified in Olympia in favor of a bill requiring education about what the Pledge of Allegiance truly means. Let's get to it. Senate Bill 6205 was introduced by State Senator Drew McEwen, and it came about because of what's happening in an Edenville middle school. And I love this because it's kids involved in the political process, and it's also a good teacher. So some kids from Edenville Middle School came to testify in favor of this Senate bill that would mandate that students are taught why we say the Pledge of Allegiance in school. So their teacher, Alex Hansen, said he became frustrated with students' behavior while they were reciting the pledge, not taking it seriously, whatever it is, like not saying the right words. And so he said that he taught students the importance of it. And after students had those lessons, they reached out to Senator Drew McEwen and pushed for this bill to maybe make this a statewide thing. And they went to Olympia to get it done.
Students disrespect the pledge, not only at assemblies, but every morning when we say it at the beginning of each day. Does this bother you? Well, it bothers me, but it's not entirely their fault because they were never taught the meaning and history of the pledge. And I think that is what is leading to the disrespect. The law as is currently written is incomplete. Why do we have to recite the Pledge of Allegiance if we don't know what it means? What I'm getting to is students disrespect the pledge because they do not know what they're pledging for. They do not know the meaning and history of the Pledge of Allegiance if they are required to say it at school.
There is a problem we face every day in schools, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance without the appreciation it deserves. Every American should value the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Those are core documents to the founding of America, and the law requires they be taught to public schools. They state our country's biggest hopes and ideals, but do we make students say them every day? No. However, we do require the pledge to be recited. Why? Because the Pledge of Allegiance is the heart and soul of those documents, of what our founding fathers established, and of our country's most important principles.
I had no actual idea what the Pledge of Allegiance meant at all. We have a law that states public schools must have appropriate flag exercises held in each classroom at the beginning of the school day at the opening of all school assemblies. My first thought when I saw this law was, why do we have a law that requires us to say something that most people don't comprehend? If students are required to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, they should have a proper education in regards to its meaning. That seems logical enough, right?
Albert Einstein once said, "Insanity is trying something over and over again, expecting a different result." Without teaching the meaning of our daily ritual known as the Pledge of Allegiance, it is insane to expect kids to automatically understand it. And how can you expect students to respect and embrace something they don't understand? You see, most children do not respect the pledge. They often horse around or make up different words for the pledge while reciting it. For example, the other day my friend kept repeating the word ravioli instead of the actual pledge words. I was annoyed.
Oh my God. Faith and humanity restored. I love those kids. This was a funny comment. UW football fan just said in the chat, are these kids being held at gunpoint to say this? My goodness, blink if you're safe. No, I love this. It's an example of a good teacher. And I've said on the show before, I'm actually opposed to requiring the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't personally like the Pledge of Allegiance. I think it, again, is that libertarian tendency in me. When it comes to kids, like, 'cause I think it can come across as a little like maybe indoctrination, where it's like, stand up, recite your pledge to the government and to the flag. But, you know, you have a choice as a child. You don't have to recite the pledge if you don't want to. But I think educating kids about the pledge makes them make that decision based on actually knowing what it was meant to do and what it's for and why we do the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I love these kids. I love that teacher. Nicole, your job is to get that teacher on the show. Okay, she says thumbs up. All right, we needed that moment of sanity from our public education system to end the show today. All right, that has been it for today's episode of Undivided. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. We appreciate every single one of you. Remember, we need you in Olympia this Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. on the steps of the Washington State Capitol. Tell your friends. We'll see you back on the live show tomorrow.